The sky above Earth didn't just darken, it seemed to shatter. Imagine looking up at a clear blue afternoon, only to watch the clouds violently part as 1,000 golden dreadnoughts block out the sun. These weren't just any ships. They belonged to the Dragon Imperium, the oldest, most powerful, and most feared biological species in the known universe. Across the galaxy, the feeds were broadcasting live. The Galactic Concordat, a council of advanced alien races that had always despised humanity, watched with barely hidden smiles. For decades, they had treated humans like the pests of the galaxy. They called us weak. They called us fragile. And now, seeing the Dragon Armada hovering over human cities, the Council assumed the inevitable. Humanity was about to be erased from existence. The planetary defense alarms wailed. Human fighters scrambled, looking like gnats preparing to fight a hurricane. The tension was suffocating. If you were there, standing on the streets, you would have felt the low hum of the alien engines vibrating right through your chest. But then, the dreadnoughts didn't fire. Instead, a single global broadcast overrode every screen, every radio, and every comms device on the planet. The visual flickered to life, revealing a towering, majestic Draken. She had brilliant crimson scales, golden armor, and eyes that held the weight of 1,000 star systems. It was Empress Valia herself. She didn't demand Earth's surrender. She didn't threaten destruction. She looked directly into the camera and said, "I'm looking for the one you call the Iron Ghost. Bring him to me." To understand why this moment paralyzed the entire galaxy, you have to understand where humanity stood in the cosmic pecking order. We were the underdogs, the runts of the litter. When humans finally managed to crack faster than light travel and stumbled onto the galactic stage, we weren't met with open arms. We were met with laughter. The other species of the Concordat were biologically superior in every way. The Draken, for example, could live for 1,000 years. They had scales tougher than our best steel, muscles that could crush boulders, and minds that processed information like supercomputers. Other races had natural telepathy or regenerative healing. And what did humanity have? We had soft skin, brittle bones, and lifespans that barely stretched past a century. In a galaxy of gods and monsters, we were terribly, painfully fragile. So humanity did what we always do when faced with an impossible disadvantage. We adapted. If our arms weren't strong enough, we replaced them with hydraulic titanium. If our eyes couldn't see in the dark, we scooped them out and installed synthetic optics. We became cyborgs. To the rest of the galaxy, this was horrifying. The Draken, who worshipped biological purity, saw us as disgusting aberrations. The Concordat treated human ambassadors like junk dealers. We were mocked for chopping off our own limbs just to keep up. They thought our reliance on machines proved we were fundamentally broken. Think about that for a second. Imagine being told by the entire universe that your very nature is inadequate. But humanity didn't care about their insults. We just wanted to survive. And it was exactly this willingness to break ourselves, to endure unimaginable pain just to keep fighting, that the galaxy completely misunderstood. They thought cybernetics made us less human. They didn't realize it was the ultimate proof of our indomitable spirit. 15 years before the Dragon Armada appeared over Earth, the galaxy was plunged into a nightmare. It wasn't a political war. It was a fight for survival against a species known only as the Scourge. They were a swarm of parasitic creatures that moved from system to system, consuming all organic matter. They didn't negotiate. They just fed. The Scourge eventually hit the Dragon Imperium. It was a massacre. The Draken were powerful, yes, but the Scourge attacked in numbers that blocked out the stars. During the chaos, a massive Scourge fleet ambushed a Draken royal transport near a dead, rocky world called Tartarus Prime. The transport crashed. Aboard that ship was a very young Valia, long before she became Empress. She was just a royal heir, trapped in the twisted wreckage of her ship, surrounded by a harsh, toxic atmosphere, and hunted by millions of Scourge drones that had landed on the planet to finish the job. The Draken Emperor begged the Concordat for help. He begged them to send a rescue fleet, but the Concordat was terrified. They looked at the numbers, ran their perfect, logical calculations, and determined that a rescue mission was statistical suicide. They abandoned the air. They told the Draken that her loss was a tragedy, but sending troops would only result in more death. Humanity wasn't invited to that meeting. We weren't considered important enough. But human intelligence intercepted the distress signal. We saw a young girl, alone in the dark, waiting to be eaten alive. The human command didn't run a statistical analysis. They didn't care about the odds. They just activated the 104th Orbital Drop Division, a unit made entirely of heavy combat cyborgs. They called themselves the Scrap Iron Boys. Sergeant Elias Thorne was the definition of what the aliens hated about humanity. Before the war, Elias had been caught in a mining accident. His body was crushed. To save his life, doctors had replaced his legs, his left arm, and a significant portion of his ribcage and spine with military-grade cybernetics. He wasn't a graceful machine. He was built for durability, covered in scarred armor plating, his joints whining with heavy servos every time he moved. Half his face was covered by a tactical optic plate that glowed a faint, intimidating red. To the pure, beautiful races of the Concordat, Elias was a monster. To humanity, he was a soldier. When the drop pods of the 104th Division slammed into the dusty, toxic surface of Tartarus Prime, they were instantly engulfed in a sea of scourge. It wasn't a battle. It was a meat grinder. The human soldiers fought with a ferocity that defied logic. When their weapons ran dry, they used their metal fists. When their biological parts were wounded, they injected themselves with combat stimulants and kept pushing forward. Elias led his squad through the burning canyons, carving a path toward the crashed Dragon transport. The environment alone would have killed a normal human in minutes. The heat was melting the rocks, and the air was pure poison. But Elias's artificial lungs filtered the toxins, and his mechanical legs pushed through the rubble without fatigue. The Dragon always thought humans were weak because we couldn't naturally survive these conditions. What they failed to understand was that humans are the only species crazy enough to rebuild their own bodies just to march into hell. By the time Elias reached the wreckage of the Royal Transport, his squad was gone. He was the only one left standing. The hull of the Draken ship was torn open like an aluminum can. Inside, the grand, golden architecture of the Draken was covered in ash and scourge acidic burns. Elias stepped heavily through the debris, his optical sensor scanning the darkness. There, backed into a corner of the ruined bridge, was Valia. Even as a teenager, she was imposing, covered in brilliant red scales, clutching a ceremonial sword that was nearly as big as Elias. But she was bleeding. She was exhausted. And the heavy blast doors of the bridge were buckling under the weight of the scourge trying to get in. Imagine being in her shoes. You are a proud Draken. You have been taught your whole life that humans are inferior, pathetic creatures. And yet, as the doors finally explode inward and a tide of screeching monsters pours into the room, it isn't a beautiful Draken warrior that steps between you and death. It's a battered, rusty, half-machine human. Elias didn't say a word. He just stepped in front of her, raised his heavy thermal rotary cannon, and opened fire. The deafening roar of the human weapon filled the room. The heat from the barrel was so intense it began to melt the floor plating. Elias stood like a mountain of iron, taking strikes and acid splashes that would have dissolved a Draken's perfect biological armor. His metal arm sparked, his synthetic skin burned away, but he did not take a single step backward. "We need to move, Princess," Elias growled, his voice distorted by his artificial vocal cords. Valia was stunned. She watched in shock as Elias casually ripped a metal beam out of the wall with his hydraulic arm to crush a leaping scourge drone. You are a machine," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm human enough," he replied, offering his scarred biological right hand to help her up. The journey from the crashed transport to the human extraction zone was 5 miles of pure nightmare. The scourge were everywhere. Elias essentially used his heavily armored body as a shield for the young Draken. This was something the alien mindset could not process. In their cultures, a superior being never sacrificed themselves for a stranger, especially not a stranger of a different, lesser species. As they fought their way through the canyons, Valia watched Elias take damage that defied comprehension. An acid spitter melted through the armor on his shoulder, exposing sparking wires and synthetic muscle. Elias just grunted, rerouted his power systems, and kept firing. A massive warrior-cast scourge impaled him through his mechanical side. Elias grabbed the creature by the throat, snapped its neck, and broke off the blade still stuck inside him. "Why are you doing this?" Valia asked as they hid behind a boulder to let a swarm pass. "Your leaders gain nothing from saving me. Your body is failing. You are going to die here." Elias looked at her, his single human eye bloodshot and tired. "Because nobody else was coming for you, kid. And where I come from, we don't leave people to die in the dark. Not even snobby aliens. If you were in that situation, surrounded by death, wouldn't you want someone like Elias by your side? Someone who doesn't know how to quit?" They reached the extraction point. It was a high ridge overlooking a valley crawling with the enemy. The human dropship was hovering just above the ground, taking heavy fire. The pilot's voice crackled over Elias's internal comms. "Sergeant, we have a problem. The ship's stabilizers are shot. We have weight capacity for one more. That's it. If you both get on, we crash." Elias didn't even hesitate. He didn't curse his luck or ask for alternatives. He just turned to Valia and pointed at the ship's open ramp. "Run!" Valia stopped. "What about you? You cannot stay here. Your power core is leaking. Your weapons are almost empty." "I'll buy you time," Elias said, his voice completely calm. He pushed her toward the ramp. "Go. Tell your people the weak humans say hello." Valia ran up the ramp. As the dropship's doors began to close, she looked back. She saw the rusted, broken humans standing alone on the edge of the cliff. The scourge were cresting the hill, thousands of them rushing toward him. Elias dropped his empty cannon. He drew a heavy combat knife and engaged his cybernetic arm's overload protocol, causing it to glow with blinding, unstable energy. He didn't look afraid. He looked ready. The doors sealed. The ship boosted into the atmosphere. The last thing Valia saw through the viewport was a massive explosion of blue energy on the ridge as Elias detonated his power core, taking hundreds of monsters down with him. The Dragon Empire mourned the human who saved their heir, but to the rest of the galaxy, Elias was just another dead human, another piece of scrap metal left on a dead world. Fast forward 15 years. We are back in the present day. The skies of Earth are filled with Draken warships. Empress Valia's voice echoes across the globe, demanding the Iron Ghost. Down in the capital city of Geneva, the human politicians were panicking. They assumed the Draken wanted to punish a human war criminal. The Galactic Concordat representatives, who had an embassy on Earth, were laughing among themselves. See? An alien ambassador sneered at the human president. Your crude cybernetics have finally offended the Empress. She has come to wipe out your disgusting unnatural race. We will not intervene to save you. But the human military database was already searching. They ran the alias Iron Ghost and cross-referenced it with the Tartarus Prime campaign. And to the absolute shock of the human high command, they found a match. Sergeant Elias Thorne wasn't dead. When he detonated his arm, the blast had collapsed the cliff, burying him under tons of rock. It crushed his remaining biological limbs and put his brain into a deep cybernetic coma. A scavenger ship had found him months later, barely a whisper of a pulse left. The military doctors had put him back together, but there was very little flesh left. He was now 90% machine. Discharged, forgotten by history, and viewed as a terrifying monster by civil society, Elias had exiled himself. He was living on a scrapyard colony on the edge of the solar system, fixing broken freighters in the silence of deep space. He didn't want medals. He just wanted peace. Within hours, a human military transport escorted by 2 massive Draken Royal Guards arrived at the scrapyard colony. The environment was bleak, rusted ships, oil stains, and the cold vacuum of space. The alien guards, perfect and pristine in their golden armor, looked at the colony with absolute disgust. They couldn't believe their divine empress was looking for something in this garbage dump. They found Elias in a dark hangar. He was massive now, built from heavy industrial parts. He looked less like a soldier and more like a walking tank. He was welding a hull plate, the sparks reflecting off his completely synthetic faceplate. When the Draken guards stepped forward to command him to come with them, Elias didn't even put down his welder. "I'm busy," his synthetic voice rumbled, deeper and more mechanical than ever before. A Concordat official who had tagged along stepped forward, his face twisted in a sneer. "You insignificant machine! You will obey the Dragon Empire, or they will burn your miserable homeworld to ashes." Elias slowly turned around. He looked at the perfect, arrogant alien, and then at the Draken guards. He didn't see an overwhelming threat. He just saw people intruding on his quiet life. "Tell the Empress," Elias said slowly. "If she wants to talk, she knows where I am." The Concordat official gasped. The disrespect. He fully expected the Draken guards to execute Elias on the spot. But instead, the guards bowed their heads respectfully, tapped their comms, and said, "He is here, Your Majesty." Less than an hour later, the sky above the scrapyard burned gold as Empress Valia's personal shuttle landed. The entire galaxy was watching this feed. Billions of aliens tuned in, expecting to see the mighty Dragon Empress execute the human who dared to insult her. Valia walked down the ramp. She was magnificent. 15 years had turned the scared princess into a towering, terrifying monarch. She radiated power. She stopped a few feet away from Elias. Elias looked up at her. His optical sensors whirred as they adjusted to the light. He stood there, covered in grease, rust, and cheap replacement parts. The ultimate contrast. Biological perfection, standing face to face with mechanical survival. "You got tall, kid," Elias said, his mechanical voice carrying a hint of warmth. The galaxy held its collective breath. The Concordat officials were screaming at their screens, waiting for her to strike him down for his insolence. Instead, Empress Valia, ruler of 10,000 star systems, commander of the most feared armada in the universe, did the unthinkable. She dropped to one knee. She bowed her head, her beautiful golden crown nearly touching the dirty, oil-stained floor of the hangar. "I owe you my life, Sergeant Thorne. I owe you my crown. I owe you my empire." The silence that followed was so profound it felt like the universe itself had stopped spinning. Aliens watching from 1,000 different worlds simply could not process what they were seeing. A Draken bowing, and not just to a human, but to a broken, fully cybernetic human. It shattered every belief they held about biology, supremacy, and strength. Valia stood back up, looking Elias in his glowing red optic. "For 15 years, the Concordat told me humans were weak. They told me your machines made you soulless. But I know the truth. I know that the iron in your bodies is nothing compared to the iron in your hearts." She turned to face the Concordat official, who was trembling in absolute terror. "Hear this, and let the galaxy hear it." Valia's voice boomed with imperial authority. "From this day forward, humanity is under the absolute protection of the Dragon Imperium. Any strike against Earth is a strike against the Draken throne. They are not the weak runts of the galaxy. They are the shield that stands in the dark when the rest of you cower in fear." She turned back to Elias, her expression softening. "My empire is vast, Elias, but it is filled with politicians and cowards. I need someone who knows how to stand their ground. I need my Iron Ghost. Come with me. Stand by my side, not as a servant, but as the supreme commander of my vanguard." Elias looked at his rusted hands. He looked at the small, quiet scrapyard he had called home. Then he looked at the Empress. "The vanguard, huh?" Elias chuckled, the sound like gears grinding together. "Do they let you blow things up?" "Whatever you desire, Commander." Valia smiled. That was the day everything changed. The Galactic Concordat had built their entire society on the idea that biological perfection was the only path to greatness. They thought humanity was a joke, a tragic species desperately replacing their fragile limbs with crude metal just to keep up. But when the greatest biological empire in the universe bowed to a rusted, scrap metal human, the illusion was shattered forever. The galaxy finally realized that humanity's strength wasn't in our muscles, our bones, or our DNA. Our strength was our absolute terrifying refusal to ever give up. We didn't replace our limbs because we were weak. We replaced them because our human will was too strong to be stopped by something as trivial as a broken body. Elias Thorne, the man who had been thrown away by his own kind, went on to lead the Draken Vanguard, a human cyborg, commanding billions of alien warriors. He never upgraded his rusted, battered chassis. He kept the scars, a constant reminder to the universe of what a human can endure. So, let the aliens have their perfect genetics and their 1,000-year lifespans. We have something better. We have the iron will to break our own bones, replace them with steel, and punch a hole straight through the impossible. When the universe demands that humanity fall, we simply forge new legs to stand back up.